Public Safety Committee to order, 10:04. We have a quorum. First order of business is to accept minutes from last month's meeting. Moved by Supervisor Sokol, seconded by Supervisor Hogan. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. First up will be Charles Wallace, Fire Prevention Building Code Enforcement. You have the floor.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
I hope you all received the fee comparisons that we did with the other towns and had a chance to look those over. I was basically asked to come back with basically what it would cost, how much we'd have to raise fees to be able to offset our expenses. So we did the research of what other towns are charging, which is in the first set of papers that are stapled together, and that you all did receive by email. The second set of papers actually is the what we charge now, and what we would have to, the second one sheet in that stapled set is what we would have to increase fees to offset all expenses. So essentially it would be a 163% increase. The specific question that I was asked when I was in here last committee meeting was how many percent that I needed to go up, and that came up to
163% to break even.
To break even.
And to give an example of some of these costs then.
Well, sure. In one and two family dwellings, it would go from 15 cents a square foot to 39 cents a square foot. Just to throw some out there, commercial buildings would go from 18 to 47 cents a square foot. Simple demolition and swimming pool permits would range from 50 to 132. Wood stoves would also go from 50 to 132. Fire safety inspections would go from $75 a piece to $197.
Charles, if a person was to come in with plans to do a 1,500 or 2,000 square foot home, let's use 2,000 for round numbers, 2,000 square foot single family residence.
Right.
What would that cost them?
Right now, about $325 with the CO fee.
Okay.
It'd go to $678, and the CO fee would be another $150 on top of that. No, I'm sorry. Give me one sec. Yes, another $66 on top of that.
Okay. It'll be over 700.
Yeah, the other side. And then minimum fees like decks, would go from 50 to 132. I mean, basically anything less square footage than comes up to the minimum fee, they get charged the minimum fee.
Okay.
One of the big ones would be certainly fire safety inspections, because that's one of the ones, when you go through the fee comparisons, that's one of the ones actually that nobody else charges for. We charge a $75 fee for it. That is on the fourth page of that first handout. Fire safety inspection.
Charles, the towns in Essex County that you chose, just because they're bordering towns?
Yeah, just because they're bordering. I
Yep.
mean, a lot of the contractors we deal with, from the northern end of the county, certainly go into Screw Lake, Minerva.
Yes. Supervisor McGowan.
Talking the fourth page, on this one here? All right, Charles, I did mention you at the beginning of when you were heading up to, I wanted to talk to you afterwards, and I'll, since we're all on this and you started out first, I've reached out to Town of Queensbury, Fire Prevention, and the City of Glens Falls Building and Codes, which they're more, they don't do the the fire department does those, but they could use some help. And I asked if they'd be interested in a shared service, you know, you know, you working it, because they're behind, and you know, it's no sense of being behind and not being safe at the same time.
Right.
I know you've asked for a you know, some more people, but if we bring up the fees where they're more acceptable, and to bring it, is this something that you'd be interested in sitting down and discussing further with if I can create the meeting?
I think we could certainly discuss it further. I think you'd be looking to, if we're talking the city, I think you'd be looking at a minimum of 2 full-time people.
Well, I'm thinking on helping, not just taking over, just, you know, working with them to get caught up and stuff like that. I mean, I just kind of threw it out there, and I really, that's why I wanted to sit down private. I'm not putting you on the spot. I would love to see if we can't have a meeting with all the, you know, sit down and see if it's feasible.
Certainly. I mean, I think that the legal aspects would have to be taken into consideration, and even to offer any help with where we're at right now, because we're barely covering the fire safety inspections that we do have to do. Like we've done, let me get to my first page here. We've done 491 fire safety inspections.
Wow.
So with the staff we have, even with the part-time staff that I'm looking to fill, I think you'd be looking at 2 people.
Okay.
2 full-time people.
Well, that's with, you know, I'll bounce it off of Supervisor Beatty too, and get some of his thoughts.
And again,
Supervisor Bramer?
I think the city has a codes committee too. Let me bounce it to that council person,
Thank you.
Councilwoman Palmer.
I mean, like I said, I was just
Yeah.
toying with the idea, and I happened to be talking to the departments, and I thought
That's a
maybe
good
if this would be a good opportunity of shared services.
right. I mean, that does come with a $75 fee, and that is the one fee that we end up being a collection agency on. Because all the other fees that people have to pay for before they get their permits, this one we end up billing 2 and 3 and times and phone calls and so on and so forth.
Supervisor Driscoll?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there a policy and procedure for individuals who don't get the permits prior to their work?
Yes, there's actually, we have a fee built into it for $100 or twice the permit fee. So it's a minimum of $100 if they do the work prior to pulling the permit, or twice, depending on which one's the higher.
But you got to catch them first.
You do have to catch.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Charles, thank you for summarizing it on the package you sent out. Was just the comparisons. It's nice to have a turnout of what it would take to have it break even. It is a steep increase. What's the pleasure of the committee at this point? Supervisor Wild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question. Supervisor Stroud, I'm not sure if he's still here. John, Queensbury has a building department. Do you subsidize that, or do the fees cover the costs of the department?
Well, we reevaluate the fees every couple of years, and we do try and get them to the point where they cover the costs. A lot of his proposed fees don't seem that out of line with what, you know, the building inspector is expected to do.
Right. Assuming the travel, with all the travel that we have too.
Travel and the number of times they have to be at a particular 2,000 square foot house. They have to be there numerous times.
I mean, we're currently half of what Queensbury's is. when it comes to single-family dwellings, these are close. They're almost half what their current fees are. But again, their fire marshal's office doesn't charge for any fire safety inspections for all the buildings that they do in South Queensbury. So, I mean, there is a big difference there. So I think there's some room to go up, if minimally, you know, just from feedback from public. I think that, you know, there is some room to go up. But, you know, when you start talking big commercial buildings, you're talking pretty substantial fees that go along with it. You know, I mean, like even all just Ride and Hide. I mean, they're for the building they just that burnt. They're replacing them. You know, they were over $4,000 in permit fees. So even with what we're at, does the amount of trips there warrant that? Certainly it does. That initial cost, when they see that sticker number, it's hard to swallow sometimes.
Supervisor Garrity, did you have?
I have another question about the fire inspection. Is this like fire blocking, where they make sure that that goes from story to story, or is this just heating like fireplaces and the like?
No, the fire safety inspection is actually pre-existing buildings, places of public assembly, churches, pretty much any municipal building, hotels, motels. Some of those are on a, depending on what they are, on a 1-year cycle. Some of those are required to be on a 3-year cycle. But basically, any place of public assembly is required to be on a 1-year re-inspection cycle.
If I could just keep going. If you were to make a recommendation, I'll try to stay on schedule. You know, a graduated increase over a number of years, right, to get us to the point where we're covering our expenses. Could you put together a proposal like that so that over the next 3 years we're at that point instead of major hit? I'm concerned that for one, it's a significant increase. Secondly, how many people are going to just go around and do things themselves and not have permits?
Certainly. I don't, in just my opinion in dealing with the feedback that we get in the office, you know, our 491 fire safety inspections, if they were all paid, because all municipal buildings are not paid, so we'll say there's 50 or 60 probably, maybe a few more that are not paid inspections, but that generated $36,825 last year for fire safety inspections. That is the one thing that we get the worst feedback on, is of these business owners, that we go out and charge them $75 to go in and force our way into their building and then charge them $75 on top of it.
Yeah, one moment, Supervisor McGowan.
Thank you.
This is on top of what towns also charge for any permitting as well. So this is above and beyond. And speaking for the town of Chester, our fees do not cover our zoning planning office per se. I don't think any town covers all those fees. We carry them out as public safety, call it, contribution. So Supervisor McGowan.
Yes. I just have a question of why we can't, if the people aren't paying, instead of, you know, turning it over to collections and everything, it's just not added onto their tax bill.
You know,
Or shut them down.
Or condemn them?
I mean, basically, that's the whole thing. If they don't pass, they're breaking the codes. But, I mean, like I said, it just puts more stress on your department. But we can work on that. I mean, but...
you know, and let's keep in mind it's also stress on businesses too. Charles sits in his office in a precarious position between being a regulatory agency of where people want to carry out just normal course of business, put on a deck, things that are simple, and people show up and go, what do you mean I have to pay you for this? And that's part of the equation. Sitting here at this table, we can see why fees are charged, but it's a tough public relations one. Supervisor Simpson and Supervisor Garrity.
I would be very cautious on this. Just, you know, we saw a 1 million square foot commercial building in Herkimer County, and just based on the 39 cents, it'd be $390,000. So we talked about affordable housing previous to this, and this stuff all adds up. And don't make any mistake, it all comes back to our residents paying this. And as far as economic development, I mean, we use Ride and High, they're paying the 4% occupancy tax, paying their sales tax, and we're going to severely impact the ability for them to operate commercially in an area that there isn't a lot of opportunity for commercial development, for economic development. So I would be very cautious on this.
Royce Garrity?
Yeah, I mean, I would just, the only thing I gotta say about the fire inspections, it used to be done by the coordinator's office. We used to have one deputy coordinator used to go out. What he would find is these businesses, if you don't keep up the inspections, you'd kill somebody in one of these businesses, Brad, or anybody. I don't want to be responsible for that because the businesses will not comply unless they know you're coming in. The rooms the back rooms are just packed with stuff. If you ever have a fire in there, you're going to hurt somebody. So I think it's made them, as much as they grouse about it, this was instituted in 2008 maybe. And one of the things, when we hired the part-time help, we were trying to generate enough money from the inspections to pay that part-time help. So as much as we don't want to put the onus on, it would be wonderful if every business would comply. And and I'll use this analogy that my code enforcement officer uses. There's a reason why they post Main Street 30 miles an hour. Because if you didn't post it 30 miles an hour, somebody would want to go 100 up there, just for the sake of going up there. So with some of these fees and some of these inspections, I'm for them. I'm not really for raising the cost too much, but don't walk away from these inspections, because if you decide to walk away from these inspections, you're going to have a tragedy, and then all of a sudden everybody will be pointing fingers. Same, it's just like the short-term rentals. People putting 20 people in a house that's built for 8. They do it all the time, and so just be careful with those inspections, because we were way behind back in 08, and when they would go in there, they couldn't even get through the aisles because so much junk was piled up there.
Charles?
I may add on to Kevin's comment with the short-term rentals. So we've been working with the zoning office with communications back and forth, and in talking with a couple of the other zoning offices throughout the town. I can see where that's going to start, may have an impact on our office with their requirements to needing an inspection done on these houses. So, depending on how that works out, again, we're in infancy stage of this, depending on how that works out, we may all of a sudden start getting several hundred more fire safety inspections that need to be done for these short-term rental houses that we normally wouldn't have a way to get into and look at, except for wording in zoning laws. So again, we're in infancy stages, but in going with shared services, we're all of a sudden going to may see some more inspections that have to be done.
Supervisor Beatty?
Yeah, I agree with Supervisor Garrity. This is a necessary evil in the sense that we have to charge, but it's for the public safety and the public good. And it's, I don't know business owners that wouldn't complain. On the other hand, at the end of the day, the rationale is they understand it needs to be done, that there is a fee associated with it, it's time and effort and so on. So, I would also agree with Supervisor Simpson. I'd be very cautious about raising the rates. I mean, I don't think this should be a profit center. There's certain places in the county where maybe they should be profit centers. This should not be a center that you are determined to make money on or even break even. I think this is a cost of the county supplying their due diligence and ensuring public safety. So that's where I am on that.
Yes, Charles?
And one other thing, if I may, with the fire safety inspection fees, keep in mind that's per occupancy classification. So we'll pick on the Sagamore because I know they have a lot of them. They have an R1, they have an R2, they have a place of public assembly, which is an A. They've got a B, they've got a mercantile, they've got a couple of U's. They're probably getting hit with $500 and $600 fire safety inspection fees. Now, mind you, we'll spend 2 days there doing them, but their fees are pretty high already that they're paying. When you get into an occupancy, a business that has multiple occupancies in it, Brighton High will end up being the same way. And I mean, not as extravagant, but any of these hotel motels that have a place that has a gym or a place of public assembly, a conference room, they're already paying that. You may look at that as $75 per business. It's not. These places may be paying $150, they may be paying $225 on every third year rotation. So you're talking some big numbers already.
Supervisor Merlino.
Just a quick thought, I own a small business, I wouldn't mind paying that $200, they do a good job, they get in there, but maybe we can arrange it that the next time they come in the following year, maybe $75 for a quick look to see if there's no changes, instead of the whole price every year, something like that, then you go, my place, I'll pay the $200 the first year, but next year we come back and look around, quicker look, just to see if everything's kept up, maybe make that $100. You know, just something for, just for the small business. And the big business too.
Okay, again, those up multiple use occupancies, there are only get inspected once every 3 years. There were residential portions. It's only the places of public assembly that get done every year.
Supervisor Driscoll and Supervisor Wild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was thinking along lines of Mr. Merlino. 163% is a lot of percent to make up, and I recognize that you don't want to hit these people who are providing opportunities for people to work. Could we come to a small amount, an annual increase of 5% or something reasonable like that, so that every year, I know in the city of Glens Falls, when I served on the council, we went back and there were fees that we hadn't increased for 15, 20 years, and possibly that could be incorporated into the annual work plan and the annual budget, so that maybe a reasonable 5% or a reasonable increase every year could be incorporated into the fee structure.
Mr. Chairman, thanks. I don't think I ever suggested that this was going to be a profit center, but at the same time, we just went through a budget process, and we're talking about being stewards of public money. Basically, the public is subsidizing what's going on with the businesses here. So I think we need to kind of increase these fees to cover some of our costs. Maybe it's at 50% instead of 130%, but I don't believe that the public should share all of these fees, this overage, so to speak. I know we're talking about public safety, that's important, but we're also talking about organizations like the Sagamore that every 3 years or 2 years or whatever it might be, $500 isn't a lot of money for all the people that go through that facility.
Supervisor McGowan.
Yeah, I'm in favor of gradually, maybe over a 3 or 4 year span of just bumping them up, and you have the choice to do that depending on your budget.
Okay.
Well, we make you feel that you have the choice to do it with, when you're doing your budget, but
Supervisor Hogan.
We're not just talking about public safety, we're talking about economic development too. So I think that's a tunnel vision way to
But
look at it.
that's different. There's
Supervisor
economic
Simpson.
development.
It's all
agencies
tied
that help.
together though.
I would just say that I've been in enough discussions when these companies, these businesses look at what they're going to pay their employees. They know the total number of dollars, so they look at the building costs, they look at the fees that they're going to pay, and they look at the profit that they can generate. And those employees' wages are dictated by a model that they're going to, so every time we do things, we need to be cautious that we're not impacting the end user, which we want good paying jobs. That was one of the issues they talked about at Tractor Supply. They started out with one number and it ended up being a much higher number, but it's, these guys are in charge, the companies and the businesses they're coming in. You know, we're working there. They're going to dictate the rate of pay.
I'm not saying gouging them, you know,
No.
but I think the fees have...
Supervisor McGowan?
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
He's still learning.
I understand what you're saying, and I don't, you know, being in business for myself and working for other business over the years, and I understand, conscious of that, and I know the bottom line is, but really, you know, he came in with his budgets with an increase, and he needs more employees, and comparing the fees to everybody else, I mean, we're dirt cheap, so I think, you know, slowly increasing them would be, you know, a benefit for the county, as long as, and along with his department.
Okay, how would the board here like to proceed with this? What's the committee's recommendation? Supervisor McGowan?
I think slowly increase the fees.
Supervisor Wild?
Chairman, thanks. Chris, you've heard a bunch of arguments. Can you come back with a proposal that kind of limits maybe what we do on the commercial side? Or Charles? To help limit the impact and the negative piece that might happen with you know, our economic development activities,
Well,
but also increase the others.
I mean, I can come back with a proposal for what? For over the next 3 years? You want to? I mean, you have the fees right here, right in front of you, compared to what everybody else is doing around us. You guys want to make a motion to put 5 cents a square foot onto this?
Equal it with Washington County? It looks like Washington
Yeah, 5
County
cents.
more.
County Queensbury's up to 30 cents. I mean, you know, you can raise your minimums. I mean, there are some things that maybe make sense, absolutely, with square footage.
Would
Maybe
the
you can
committee like to
squeeze a little
give...
more out of it. There are some things like under the fire safety aspect, or a wood stove, or a swimming pool, that don't make any sense to raise them more than $50. For somebody to come in and put a $200 porch on them and charge them $100 to put a heat, or to install a wood stove and charge them $100 to go look at it, when you're there, you know, 20 minutes, maybe tops. You know, there are some things that maybe square footage wise we could do something with. And again, this is all going to come down to the board's decision, because when I get asked the questions with regards to fees, he blames us. The board sets the fees. That's the way it's always been.
That's right, and that's why we're here. Supervisor Bramer.
Thank you. I think it would be useful, though, Charles, if you could give us a recommendation on a fee schedule with a slight increase in some areas that make sense.
Yeah.
We can certainly do that.
Yeah. Supervisor Simpson?
I was just going to say, but we have to keep in mind that the towns are also, because we have a zoning authority, we can charge fees on top of the county. So we may even, if you total these up, we may be at the 30 cents that Queensbury is. I'm not sure.
Yes, but probably Queensbury doesn't have a zoning fee. I don't know, I'm not sure.
Because we have permits for septics also, permits for construction, additions on top of the county.
Yes. Supervisor Wild?
Mr. Chairman,
And then
thanks. I would like
Supervisor
to offer my assistance if we can get a couple of other town supervisors to develop a proposal that makes sense, that takes into account what the county's trying to do with balancing our costs, looking at economic development, as well as understanding how the individual towns kind of add on to those fees and come up with a proposal.
Thank you and the chairman.
Pardon me?
Can I suggest you and the chairman?
No, I'm actually looking for a couple of others. So.
Volunteering people?
That's right. Okay, Supervisor Beatty, we'll come back to that. Supervisor Wild?
Just one comment. I was involved with a company that we would add on 30 to 40 units a year. And one of the decisions, there's a number of decisions that went into where we would locate, why we would locate there, the demographics, all that. But one of them was the cost of doing business in that town. And I remember one case in Ohio, a little town, was going to hit us with such absorbent fees that we literally turned off and pulled out of a lease, a 5-year lease, because I overruled it and said the costs were just too high. If you look at this over a year. Now, I'm not saying this is too high, But I'm just saying, I agree with Mr. Simpson and Gary, we have to be very cognizant, and Ms. Hogan, of the economic development part of this. That is a piece of this equation. And I don't want us to outbid ourselves or get a little greedy, and I won't, greedy is probably not the right term, but then to turn off a potential chain to come in because they're looking at all this. A lot of these changes look, big businesses look at every detail in scrutinizing. And I know we don't think about it a lot of times at this level, but it happens. And I can tell you, I've been personally involved with that. So just be cautious on any type of increase we do. Be very, very conservative. That would be my recommendation.
Okay. Well, could I ask Supervisor Wild, Supervisor Hogan, and Supervisor Garrity to take a look at this with Charles?
Yeah, two of them are running, I'm not next year, so that makes it.
Running from what?
Running for election.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't mind looking, but the only thing I was going to add, if you really want to build cheaply, come to Warrensburg, because our fees are not that much. For any economic development opportunities.
That's
Right off the
Did the reporters get that? Yeah. Yep. Supervisor Thomas?
Yeah, I think when it comes to residential projects, I think it's just the fees either, you know, it's the changes in code that continually happen, and the changes in materials that you're required to
Correct.
buy to put into your building, and the changes in house structures, you know, so there's more to it than just fees. It's like Big Brother, it's right there, you know. You build your house this way, you put this much insulation in your walls,
Yeah.
it's not just fees.
He has if I may, he has a very valid point. There was a substantial increase in the 2015 code changes for the cost of construction. I think that the state is only going to hold back on residential sprinklers for so long. They're only going to be able to hold out on that for so long. So again, we're going to see another substantial increase. You know, just blower door testing, energy code. You know, there's a lot of increases that it costs for a very basic house that are going on already.
And then we have affordable housing programs.
Right. It's a chasing a tail. You know, the whole affordable housing, it's chasing the tail here. We keep increasing the cost of building so that we're at a point that we do not have affordable housing. So, yeah. Or creative. You know, that's the other part that comes into it too. There's other ways of building besides what is in the code, but it's codified and you can't really, you gotta go with it. So. All right. Anything else for fire prevention, building safety, building code enforcement? Thank you, Charles.
Thanks,
Ryan. Next up is Office of Emergency Services. Brian, you have the floor.
Oh, yeah. What did I do with that?
Thank you, Chairman Leggett. Mine should be substantially shorter than Charlie's. I have one item under my report. That's just to renew the contract that we currently have with the Glens Falls Fire Department to provide our cause and origin fire investigation. This is...
Who moved it? Okay, Supervisor Garrity on motion, seconded by Supervisor Simpson. Fees are the same as last year?
Yes.
Any other things you'd like to add to it? Here? No? Okay. Call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carries.
I'm set. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Next up is probation. Bob?
Morning.
You have the floor.
Mr. McGowan? Well, thanks, Rob, but I have
Supervisor McGowan?
I just wanted to go on record, as I do every time that Bob comes up, that my wife does work for probation, so I will be abstaining from voting.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, Bob.
On my agenda this morning, I have
the renewal request for contracts we currently have in place. The first one is a contract to extend with Warren, Hamilton Counties Community Action for our Alternative Sentencing Program. That is community service that they've been performing for us for probably about the last 10 years. And that contract is for $60,000. They take care of the community service that is ordered in the adult and criminal courts.
Make a motion.
Moved by Supervisor Garrity, seconded by Supervisor Sokol. Yes, discussion. Supervisor Hogan.
I've worked with alternative sentencing for years, and I just want to say I think this is a lot of bang for our buck here. Not only benefits the people that are in it, but so many organizations throughout the county benefit from the time and the work that's done through this. So thank you.
They do a fantastic job.
They do.
Good, thank you. Any further discussion? Supervisor Garrity?
Yeah, we get a lot of clients from alternative sentencing also, and they do, when they're there, for the most part, they show up when they're supposed to, and they do service a lot of our needs, and I'm happy with it.
No further discussion, call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carries. Next item, Bob?
Next resolution request is to extend our memorandum of understanding with the Department of Social Services for $60,000 in revenue that comes through our department for preventative services. We have one probation officer that is mostly funded through this funding opportunity, and that probation officer does work in our schools where, if not for them, then potentially there's more chance of placement. That individual is usually in the Glens Falls School District, one of our busier schools. So we've had that funding stream with the Department of Social Services again, probably for about 10 years.
Is that a motion, Supervisor Driscoll?
Yes.
Yeah, moved by Supervisor Driscoll, seconded by
Sokol, I think.
by Supervisor Sokol. Okay, discussion? Now this is, am I reading this right? It's coming from DSS
Correct.
to
Probation.
Okay. No further discussion, called question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carries. Yes?
Next resolution request is to extend the contract with KMG Monitoring for electronic monitoring of adult offenders. And this is a program we've done probably for about the last 6 or 7 years, where we made electronic monitoring available mostly to our county court and in some degree to our local courts for certain cases where, if not for it, the judge would incarcerate an individual. This typically happens in county court where the judge is determining bail or release. A lot of times he releases individuals to our supervision, and some for the high-risk cases, he looks to add the component of electronic monitoring on that in lieu of having that individual stay in jail. We've used it in our local courts, in Glens Falls City Court, Queensbury Court. We've used it in conjunction with our opioid diversion program, where we have a probation officer involved with Glens Falls City Court. And on certain times, there's different cases in the jail where we look to get individuals out, and we use electronic monitoring in conjunction with that. So total amount is for $7,500 per year. We've used about $4,000 this year, and we pay for what we use.
I'll make a motion.
Moved by Supervisor Garrity, seconded by Supervisor Simpson. Any further, any discussion? No discussion. Call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carries.
Last resolution request, again, is for electronic monitoring. This is for juveniles. And now we've added the phrase adolescent offenders to cover our raise the age youth. And what this contract does is it states, is provides electronic monitoring in lieu of detention, or with our adolescent offenders in lieu of specialized security detention. So, again, at different times, a judge will look at release decision, and in lieu of detaining somebody, they will use electronic monitoring, where
KMG hooks them up, they do all the monitoring, they monitor 24 hours a day. If there's an issue, they check it out. The other thing we built into this contract years ago, when the state passed the detention risk assessment instrument, they required the counties to have a mechanism in place to do a detention risk assessment on all individuals who are looking to go to detention. And with that, it's a form that has about 4 questions, and it contains a little bit of research, but you're supposed to have somebody on call 24 hours a day to man that in case you have the police pick somebody up in the middle of the night, because they cannot get into detention without what's called a DRA, Detention Risk Assessment Instrument. So we built that into the contract with KMG for no additional cost. And the other thing we're working on, and what they've agreed to also do for us, is to have after-hour coverage for raise the age cases, where when court is not in session, there's accessible magistrates. There's a list of accessible magistrates in the county. There are attorney judges in our lower courts. And if a situation happens, for instance, in the middle of the night, where an individual is arrested and they're looking to possibly detain the individual, again, there needs to be some type of access to probation department for potential help with detention. So instead of doing any type of after-hours coverage with our department, KMG has agreed to also do the raise the age coverage, where they would assist the courts, one, with electronic monitoring if it was needed, or helping them find a detention bed after hours. So we've looked to add to what they've done for us. The majority of 62% of the cost of this contract, which is a minimum of $1,450 a month, is paid through STSJP funding. That's 62%, which is accessed through the Department of Social Services, where they're the lead. That is for alternatives to the detention of individuals, as well as supervision or treatment for different individuals. STSJP, we have a multitude of programs that are involved with it, and electronic monitoring is just one facet. So 62% of that cost is paid for by STSJ funding, and I've also added money into our Raise the Age budget, or the fiscal instrument we filled out for the state, to cover additional costs should we have any Raise the Age cases. So we've looked to access state funding for the majority of costs of this program.
So out of that $1,450 per month, that would also include the risk assessment as well, were you saying? Okay.
The risk assessment for the detention and the helping with the Raise the Age after hours.
And 62% of that $1,450 is provided by state, plus you're putting in for some other reimbursement with your Raise the Age?
Correct.
Okay. Make sense to everybody? Okay. Do we have a motion on the floor already on this? Okay. Who would like to move it? Okay, Supervisor Wild. Who'd like to second it? Supervisor Hogan. Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carries.
And the last thing I have under information and discussion is Raise the Age, since that went into effect on October 1st, just to update the committee. It's been going very slowly in our county, which is good. We've had one 16-year-old misdemeanor JD that's come into our court, that's come into our department for diversion. We have not had any felony cases yet for adolescent offenders, so it's going slow, which we anticipated, which is a good thing. And those numbers are consistent through the state. It's very slow at this point. So I'm sure that things will change as time goes on. And the other thing we've done for programming for Raise the Age since we've last met is we've reached out with our employment and training, and they're in the process, or they've developed a program to assist young people in working, providing wages for young people to work and provide, hire them with a company and pay their wages. We're going to submit that with our Raise the Age financial application as an amendment. The other thing we've done is we've reached out to Big Brothers and Big Sisters for mentoring. Mentoring's been discussed with our family court.
and there's different ways to do mentoring, but Big Brothers and Big Sisters is certainly the gold standards of mentoring. So we're in the process of discussing how they could assist with this population, how we can help them, or help what they need for increased mentors, and just to see how we can make that work. So I will keep everybody updated as we go on. Again, that's potentially money if we do have a lot of youth that need mentors. We can certainly put that in the Raise the Age financial plan as part of being reimbursed should there be additional costs that Big Brothers and Big Sisters would need. Raise the Age is an ongoing process. We submitted our financial plan. We haven't heard anything. It's my understanding 27 counties to date have submitted their applications. None have been formally approved by the state. I know NISAC has asked the question of when will these be approved, and they have not received any response from the state. So I think the state of New York is figuring out what they're doing also, as well as a lot of us. And even though they said the plan would be, everything would be 100% reimbursable, there's limited dollars on the state. So my guess is they're trying to figure out how they're going to make it work. But we've been told we can amend our plan at any time. And these are new programs as we go along, and as we find what our kids need, we're going to be looking to reach out to our community to see how we can develop programs or enhance a different program. So we've been working on it. It's going slow, but we're prepared when it happens.
Great, thanks, Bob, and thanks for reaching out on the social and economic side of youthful offenders as well with the jobs and the Big Brothers, Big Sisters. Yep. Supervisor Wild, did you have your hand up?
I did not this time.
Okay. This must have been. Any other questions or discussion for probation? Hearing none, we'll adjourn probation. Thank you.
Thank you.
I swear I thought I saw it come up. Thank you, Under Sheriff Lamry. Welcome.
Good morning. On our action agenda, item A and item B are very similar. They're requesting maintenance contracts for our fleet, for our vehicles, OES, probation.
Motion bring those onto the floor, both of them. Supervisor Wild, second by Supervisor Garrity. Any questions? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motions for A and B carried.
Item C is a request a resolution to amend the budget to reflect revenue from the Grayscape for the security services we provide.
Moved by Supervisor Garrity, seconded by Supervisor McGowan. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carries. D?
Item D is a resolution to transfer funds between our codes.
Still doing okay in salaries regular?
Yes.
Okay, moved by Supervisor McGowan, seconded by Supervisor Wild. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? None. Motion carries.
Item E is a request a resolution for a new contract with Correctional Medical Care to provide medical, behavioral health, dental, and ancillary services to the inmates in the Warren County Correctional Facility.
Motion bring it to the floor. Supervisor McGowan, second by Supervisor Sokol. Thank you. It's on the floor. Discussion? Supervisor McGowan.
We did discuss this at a previous meeting, didn't we, the contracts that came in?
We did, and in fact, under topics for discussion, Supervisor Bramer had compiled a spreadsheet comparison, if you will, that broke down the services and the costs involved with each one of the companies that responded.
All right, yeah, I just wanted to make sure we went over that, so it was just on the record that in case someone missed the minutes.
Yes, and this is in addition to what was posted. Any of the details you'd like to present to the committee?
There's a change in our staffing matrix. The original staffing matrix that we had been working under was for a daily inmate census of between 90 and 100 inmates per day. As you're aware, this summer, we were up in the 170s. Our numbers are continually high right now. Our health services administrator basically told us that we were having trouble meeting requirements when they do interviews with inmates and when we actually see them. There's certain windows of time that we have to abide by, and because our staffing was being stretched, our medical staffing that is, being stretched because of the number of inmates that they had to care for, was creating hardships for them as well. So the staffing matrix was amended. We added 3.6 positions, it's LPN positions, to help accommodate the increased load that they have downstairs in the jail. The other thing is we have an aggregate amount. It was we went from having an aggregate amount of $240,000, where if we exceeded that for pharmacy cost and outside services, that we would have to pay for that. We increased that at no additional charge to the county, $290,000 to limit our exposure.
Supervisor Bramer?
Thanks. On the sheet that I put this together, but Under Sheriff Lamley did help me correct it, so thank you for that. And also on the services listed underneath the dollar amounts, I just want to note that it's not completely comprehensive because the bids were enormous documents, and I didn't put down every single little thing, so I don't want you to think that, for instance, I don't know if CMC does the pharmacy portion, but I think that they do, but I didn't write that down on the sheet, just as a, for instance, it's not completely comprehensive. I'm sure if you wanted to look at all the bids, that the sheriff would help you provide access to those if you wanted to see every little service being provided under the medical services contract.
So what's your take on this?
I came to the same conclusion they did, that CMC is providing comparable services to the other bidders at the lowest price.
Thank you for doing that research.
Yeah.
Yep. And on page 22, these are basically the contract amounts then that we're looking at for the next 3 years?
Correct. That's why I included a copy of the contract so everybody would see exactly what it is.
On that line over 150, that's the surcharge?
Correct. It's slightly over $4 a day per inmate, is what the surcharge is.
Any questions?
Just a quick one, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
if you don't mind.
Supervisor Weil.
Sean, are we doing anything additional in terms of managing the opioid crisis that is existing and any kind of additional counseling?
We're
or
looking
support?
at some different programs right now. One is the reentry coordinator, where we have the ability to put people in touch, whether it's mental health or alcohol or drug dependence, and get them set up. So we want them to succeed when they get out of the correctional facility, obviously, and less likelihood that they'll re-enter the facility.
But that's totally new in addition to this.
There are things that we can do. I think we can leverage programs that are already out there existing.
Okay.
It's just a matter of getting them implemented into the facility. And
You
seeing
could
how
just give us an update on that, as we get a little bit closer, Sean?
Yes.
I'd like to hear more about that. I'm sure it's probably of interest to everyone here at the table additionally. Thank you.
If there's no other questions by the committee, we'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
And one abstention by Supervisor Hogan. Thank you.
Are you taking advantage of this?
I'm not really sure what his status is, so I figured I'd be safe.
Under topics for discussion, item A is I just want to make the committee aware we had a bid award for the update to the recording system. As you're aware, we put out a bid. The bid came back. They chose the higher option, which is not what we wanted from the onset. So it was put out again, and when it came back, it was much more in line with what we thought the cost should be. It's about $42,000 for the upgrade, and the annual maintenance was $8,900 per year. Right now, we're going to use grant money to pay for the upgrade and to pay for the first 2 years.
Good. Glad that came back through okay, according to your expectations. That's good.
Item B, I think we've already covered, and that was the breakdown by Supervisor Bramer of the contracts for the medical portion. Item C, corrections overtime, just so the committee is aware. At the time I compiled this, it was at $605,994. And item D, we currently have 8 correction officer vacancies, 1 correction sergeant vacancy. And the committee is aware they just gave an exam this past Saturday, correction officer.
Good. And they'll know the results of that and
Hopefully within about 2 months.
2 months.
You don't have any
I do not.
Yep. Sheriff?
Relative to the correction, I had the confidential assistant, and Sean is aware of this as well, but I just wanted to know what our regular .1s for regular pay coming out, and we're still good there. We're going to have, we're projected, according to her numbers, about $170,000 good there because of the people we haven't been able to fill yet, so we still got some leeway there.
Good. We'll make it to the end of the year.
That's accurate.
170,000.
Good. Supervisor Hogan?
I know I've asked this before, but how is morale with the people covering these vacancies?
They want us to fill them.
I don't think very many of the correction officers want to work more than their 8-hour shift down there. They won't be stuck for another 8-hour shift on top of theirs.
Yeah. There's no other discussion. A motion to close public safety criminal justice. Supervisor Sokol, second by Supervisor Simpson. All those in favor? Motion carries.